The boardroom on the 41st floor had a view that could make you forget what cruelty looked like. Lake Michigan stretched silver and endless to the east, and on clear mornings you could almost convince yourself that everything down there was small enough to be managed. Elaine Marsh was not a woman who spent time at the window. She stood at the head of the conference table, with her arms crossed and her eyes on the door, and every person in the room knew that whatever came next was not going to be pleasant. The quarterly numbers were bad. Not catastrophic, not yet, but the kind of bad that left marks if you let it sit. And Elaine did not let things sit. "Walk me through the Houston delay," she said. Frank DeLuca, her VP of Logistics, shifted in his chair the way people do when they're choosing between the truth and a version of the truth that might keep them employed. Supply chain issue coming out of the port. We had a 3-day window that closed faster than. I didn't ask for weather and windows. I asked for accountability. Elaine's voice was the kind of quiet that made rooms go still. We lost a 7-figure contract because a shipment arrived late. Someone decided that close enough was good enough. I need to know who decided that. The door opened. Everyone turned. The man who stepped inside was wearing gray work pants and a shirt with the Marsh Group Facilities emblem on the chest pocket. He had the look of someone who'd been moving fast, hair not quite settled, the faintest flush on his jaw, one hand still gripping the strap of a worn canvas bag. He stopped when he saw the room full of people watching him, and something crossed his face. Not embarrassment. Something quieter than that. "I'm sorry," he said. "I was told to come up for the HVAC consult. I didn't realize. You're 40 minutes late." Elaine stepped closer. In her heels, she was nearly his height. "Do you know what room this is?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know what we're discussing?" He glanced at the screen. Climate systems, electrical upgrades, the third-floor retrofit proposal his team had been scheduled to present. The building services update I was supposed to. 40 minutes ago. He met her eyes. His were steady and dark and carrying something she didn't have a name for. Not defiance. Not quite. "Yes, ma'am, so you understand that when I say 9 o'clock, I mean 9 o'clock. Not 9:40, not close enough." She gestured toward the room. "I have 32 people in here who were on time. You're the only one who wasn't. I understand. What's your name?" "Doyle. Marcus Doyle. Mr. Doyle." She let the name sit for a moment. "I run a company on the principle that standards exist for everyone, not just the people in suits. You had one job today, which was to show up on time to a meeting you were specifically told to attend. You didn't." His jaw tightened. That quiet thing in his eyes deepened. He didn't argue. Didn't offer another explanation. He just looked at her with the patience of someone who had been through things that made this moment feel like a light rain. "You're terminated," she said. "HR will have your final check processed by end of day. Please leave your access badge with security." The room was so still she could hear the ventilation system hum. Marcus Doyle reached into his shirt pocket, removed the badge, and set it on the corner of the conference table without a word. He picked up his bag. He looked at her one more time, and the expression on his face, not anger, not bitterness, but something that looked uncomfortably close to understanding, made something tighten in her chest that she immediately dismissed. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said. Then he walked out, and the door closed behind him. Elaine turned back to the room. Where were we? It wasn't a question. Marcus took the elevator down alone. His reflection in the doors looked older than he felt. He pulled out his phone while the numbers dropped. One new text from his daughter Penny, sent 43 minutes ago. "Dad, are you coming to my thing tomorrow?" He typed back. "Wouldn't miss it. What time does it start?" 3 p.m. Also, I made you a card. I'm honored. It has a dog on it, even though we don't have a dog best card I've ever received. He pocketed the phone. The elevator opened. The lobby of the Marsh Group Tower was all polished concrete and corporate art, the kind of place that spent a lot of money making sure you knew money had been spent. Marcus walked past the security desk, set his badge on the counter, and didn't explain. The guard, a guy named Eddie who'd been working the desk since before Marcus started, looked at the badge and then at Marcus. Heading out early, heading out for good. Eddie's face did the thing faces do when they don't know what to say. "She got you." "Man, I'm sorry." Marcus shook his hand. "Take care of yourself, Eddie." Outside, the November air hit him like a door. Chicago in the late fall had a particular kind of cold, not the bone-deep freeze of January, but something with an edge to it, a warning. He turned his collar up and walked 6 blocks to the parking structure where he'd left his truck. He sat in the driver's seat without starting it for a while. His phone buzzed again, a reminder from his sister. "Penny's half day tomorrow. I can pick her up if you're working." He typed back, "No, I've got her, thank you." Then he started the truck and pulled out into traffic. He had maybe 3 months before things got tight. He knew the number. He always knew the number. That was the thing about raising a kid alone. You got very precise about what you could and couldn't absorb. His ex had left when Penny was 2, which was long enough ago that he'd stopped being angry about it and started being grateful, because it meant he'd had 4 years of figuring out how to do this on his own, and he was good at it, even when it didn't look that way from the outside. He stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Soup ingredients, Penny's specific brand of crackers, apples because she went through them like they were candy. He drove home to their apartment in Bridgeport, the second floor of a narrow brick 2-flat that had great windows and a landlord who fixed things. He unpacked the groceries and stood at the counter for a minute, looking at the corkboard on the wall covered in Penny's drawings and his work schedule and a photograph of the two of them at the lakefront last July, squinting into the sun. He started dinner. Elaine's afternoon was a series of meetings that blurred into each other and a persistent low-level discomfort she refused to examine. Her assistant, Roz, knocked at 4:30. Connor wants 5 minutes. Connor Hale was her COO and had worked for her for 6 years. He had good instincts and occasionally bad timing. Send him in. He came in already talking. The building services team is 3 people down going into the retrofit season, and you just cut the one guy who knew the third-floor system better than anyone. He was 40 minutes late. He was 40 minutes late once in 2 years. Elaine looked up. 2 years of not being late, and then he is. That tells me something. It tells you he had a bad morning. It tells me I can't predict him. Connor sat down without being asked, which he only did when he'd decided to dig in. You know what David in IT told me? He said Doyle diagnosed a cooling problem last winter that would have shut down the server room for 3 days. Just walked by, heard something, came back with a fix. That's not a guy who's phoning it in. That's a guy who was good at his job and couldn't show up on time. You didn't ask him why. Elaine said nothing. Did you? I don't run this company by collecting excuses. Connor looked at her for a long moment. There's a difference between an excuse and a reason. She picked up her pen. Is that everything? He stood. You know what your problem is, Elaine. You're so afraid of seeming soft that you overcorrect. You come in twice as hard as you need to, every time. Get out of my office, Connor. He went. She sat alone with the city going dark outside her window and a feeling she couldn't name sitting low in her chest. She worked until 7:30. She took a car home to her apartment in the Gold Coast and ate leftover Thai food standing at her kitchen counter and thought about Nadia, her daughter, who was 8 years old and currently at her father's house for the week. She called her before bed, Mom. Nadia's voice was blurry with sleep she was pretending not to feel. It's late, I know. I just wanted to hear your voice. I made a diorama today. Of the solar system. Was it accurate? Dad let me use a flashlight for the sun. Smart, I used a marble for Mercury. It kept rolling off. Elaine smiled in spite of herself. Get some sleep, baby. You should too, Mom, I will. She didn't for a while. She lay in the dark and thought about the man who'd walked out of her conference room without arguing, without begging, without even looking surprised. The way he'd set the badge on the corner of the table, as if he'd known this was coming and had made his peace with it before she'd finished speaking. She told herself it didn't matter. She was almost convinced. Marcus was making Penny's lunch the next morning when his phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus Doyle. Mr. Doyle, this is Officer Tran with Chicago PD. Your daughter attends Bridgeport Elementary? His hand stopped. Yes, she's safe. I want to lead with that. But there was an incident during morning drop-off that we need you to come in for. He was already grabbing his keys. What kind of incident? A man was observed approaching children near the south entrance. Your daughter flagged it to a teacher immediately. She's okay, but she's asking for you. The drive took 11 minutes. He was there in 9. Penny was sitting in the principal's office, wrapped in a too-big sweater one of the teachers had lent her, holding a paper cup of water with both hands. She looked up when he came in, and her face did what his heart did, broke open and then pulled itself together. Dad. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair. I'm here. You okay? I told them right away, she said. Like you taught me. I didn't go with him. I went to Ms. Reyes. That's exactly right. He put his hand on her cheek. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. The principal, a steady woman named Dr. Fowler, walked him through it. A man in a gray jacket, mid-40s, had approached 3 children near the gate. Penny had gone directly to the nearest adult. Police were reviewing footage. The man had left before officers arrived. She handled it perfectly, Dr. Fowler said. You've prepared her well. Marcus listened to everything, asked the right questions, filed his statement. Stayed with Penny until her color came back, and she asked if she could go back to class because she had reading time and she didn't want to miss it. He walked her to her classroom, held her hand the extra half-second before she let go, and watched her disappear through the door. Then he sat in his truck in the parking lot and let his hands shake. Elaine's afternoon was blocked from 2 to 4 for a vendor presentation that she'd restructured 3 times and still wasn't satisfied with. At 3:15, her phone rang. Personal cell, not office. Nadia's father's number. Her stomach dropped before she answered. What happened? Drew's voice was careful. She's okay. She's at Northwestern Memorial. Elaine, she's okay. Let me talk. What happened to my daughter? There was a man outside her after-school program. He tried to grab her. 3 people stepped in and he ran. She has a cut on her arm where she fell. That's it. She's fine, the doctor already. Elaine was putting on her coat while he was still talking. The drive took forever. The hospital was too bright and too loud and smelled like something that made her think about mortality. Drew was in the hallway outside the exam room, pale in a way she'd never seen him pale. She's asking for you, he said. Tell me what happened first. An officer named Reyes, different one, Elaine would register that later, walked her through it. Nadia had been walking from the program entrance to the pickup lane when a man approached her, said he knew her mother, said her mother had sent him. Nadia had said no and screamed when he grabbed her arm, which was what her mother had taught her to do. 3 bystanders had intervened. The man fled on foot. Who were they? Elaine asked. Officer Reyes checked her notes. A woman named Lourdes Castillo who works in the building next door, a teenager named Devon Park, and a man named Marcus Doyle. The name landed like something physical. Elaine stood very still. Say that again, Marcus Doyle. He was in the area when he heard your daughter screaming. He was the primary intervener. He physically confronted the suspect. The man fled. Mr. Doyle stayed with your daughter until we arrived. Where is he? He was treated for a broken hand and some bruising. I believe he's still. Elaine was already moving. She saw Nadia first. She had to. Her daughter was sitting up in the hospital bed, looking small and exhausted and somehow fine, and Elaine held her for a long time without saying anything, because there weren't words for what it felt like to see your child's face after hearing what she'd heard in that car. You screamed, Elaine finally said. Really loud, Nadia confirmed. I think the whole street heard me. Good girl. The man who helped me told me I was brave. You were. He had a hurt hand. He said it was okay, but it didn't look okay. Nadia looked at her. Do you know who he is? Something in Elaine's throat pulled tight. I think I might. She kissed her daughter's forehead and told her she'd be right back and found Officer Reyes and asked which room. The answer took her down a corridor and around a corner to a curtained bay where Marcus Doyle was sitting on the edge of an exam table while a nurse finished wrapping his right hand in a soft cast. His face had a cut above his eyebrow, taped closed. His jacket was torn at the shoulder. He looked up when she came in. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. How's your daughter? He said. His voice was exactly the same. Quiet, steady, carrying more than it let on. She's fine. Elaine stopped a few feet from him. Because of you. He nodded once and didn't say anything. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't. I do. Yesterday you made a call based on what you knew. He watched her with those dark eyes. That's your job. What I knew wasn't enough. I didn't ask why you were late. I was late. You were late because of Penny. Something shifted in his face. Not surprise. Just a door opening slightly. There was a man at her school, Elaine said. The morning I fired you, I read the incident report. I requested it this afternoon. She stopped. You filed a police report on your daughter's behalf, drove her to school late, and then got stuck in traffic trying to make up time. And I fired you in front of a room full of people before you could say 2 sentences. Marcus looked at his wrapped hand. Would it have mattered, he said, if I'd told you? The question sat there the way questions do when they're actually looking for something honest. I don't know, Elaine said. And that's the part I keep thinking about. The nurse stepped back and told Marcus he was free to go, handed him aftercare instructions, and left them alone. Elaine said, Let me drive you home. I can take the with a broken hand. I've managed worse, I know. She said it without thinking, and he looked at her. I looked at your file, she said. After I found out, you don't have to talk about it. He was quiet for a moment. Army, structural engineer, 3 deployments. The note in your file said you left your previous firm because of a family health situation. My wife. He said it the way people say things they've said 1,000 times and still haven't gotten used to. She got sick, ALS. I quit to take care of her. When she died, I took whatever job had the best hours and decent benefits so I could be home for Penny. Elaine felt something move in her chest. How long ago? 3 years. So it's been you and Penny? Yeah. How old is she? 6. She thought about Nadia. About the way Nadia had said the man who helped me had a hurt hand with the complete factual concern of a child who takes the world at face value. Let me drive you home, Elaine said again. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his bag and stood slowly and said, Okay. They didn't talk in the elevator. They didn't talk through the lobby. Her driver pulled up without being asked, and Marcus gave an address in Bridgeport, and they rode south through the city in a quiet that wasn't comfortable exactly, but wasn't hostile either. She asked the question that had been sitting in her since the conference room. Why didn't you argue? He kept his eyes on the city outside the window, because I'd already decided it wasn't going to work. I could see what was happening. You weren't looking for an explanation. I should have been, maybe, but I've been in enough rooms to know when the verdict's in. That's a sad way to go through life. He half smiled. The first time she'd seen that. It's practical. Is there a difference? He thought about it. I used to think so. The car turned onto his street. The building was a narrow brick, too flat, with clean windows and a light on in the second floor. He reached for the door. Caleb? She stopped herself. She'd been about to say the wrong name, the wrong person, some rehearsed version of what she'd planned to say. I want to give you your job back. He looked at her. Not because of today, she said. Because I was wrong. I made a snap judgment and didn't give you the chance to explain, and that's on me. Today changes what I know about you, but it doesn't change the original mistake. That was mine. I want to correct it. He was quiet for a moment. Then, is that what you want, or is that what makes you feel better? The bluntness of it hit her somewhere she deserved to be hit. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Then don't decide tonight. He opened the door. Thank you for the ride, Ms. Marsh. He closed the door before she could answer. She watched him walk to the building, moving carefully, favoring his right side where the hand was wrapped. Then her driver pulled away, and she sat in the back of the car, feeling like she'd been weighed by something and come up short. Her assistant looked startled the next morning when Elaine arrived at 7 with 2 coffees and no particular expression. Connor in yet? He gets in at 8. Get him early. When Connor appeared, coat still half on, Elaine told him to close the door and sit down. She told him what had happened, all of it. His face moved through several things while she talked. When she finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to apologize. Properly. Not to one person, to everyone." She looked at the city out the window. "I want to do a company-wide meeting, not a press release, not a memo, a meeting where I stand in front of the people who work for this company and tell them I got it wrong." Connor studied her. "That's a big swing. Yeah, some people will think you're performing. Some people will be right." She turned from the window, "But some won't. And maybe that's enough to start." The meeting happened that afternoon. 214 people gathered in the main atrium. Elaine stood at the front without notes, which was the hardest part. She'd built a career on always knowing what she was going to say next. 3 days ago, I fired a man named Marcus Doyle, she began. I did it publicly, in front of the executive team, because he was 40 minutes late to a meeting, and I wanted to make a point about standards. She paused. What I didn't know, because I didn't ask, was that he was late because there'd been a threat at his daughter's school, and he'd spent the morning making sure she was safe. The atrium was silent. I found out who he was because 2 days later, he saved my daughter's life. She didn't let the weight of that land for too long. But I want to be clear about something. That's not why I'm standing here. I'm standing here because whether or not he'd saved Nadia, I was wrong. I made a judgment without asking a question. And in doing so, I failed someone who deserved better from the company he was working for. She looked out at the crowd. I've run this organization on the idea that standards are non-negotiable and accountability is universal. I still believe that. But I failed to hold myself to the same standard. So this is me doing that. No one applauded. She hadn't expected them to. But later, when she was walking back to her office, 3 different people stopped her in the hallway. A woman in accounting said, "Thank you for saying that." A man from IT said, "I've been here 7 years. I didn't know you could do that." He meant it as a compliment and she took it as one. Connor found her at 4 o'clock. He set a folder on her desk and didn't sit down. "He's been talking to schools," he said. "What?" "Doyle. 3 schools in the metro area reached out to him after the news piece ran about the attempted abduction. He's been reviewing their security protocols, pro bono, mostly. One of them offered to pay him." Elaine opened the folder, a printout of a local news article, brief but real. Local father intervenes in attempted abduction, credited by police with preventing serious harm. Below it, a handwritten note in Connor's writing. He turned down the commendation ceremony. "He's good at it," Connor said. "The school thing. Apparently he has a background in structural vulnerability assessment and some kind of emergency response training from his military time. He's not just checking locks. He's rethinking how these places are designed." Elaine read the article twice. "Leave his information in the system," she said finally. "If anything opens up that fits, I want to know before anyone else does." Connor looked like he wanted to say something. He didn't. He took the folder and left. 3 weeks passed. Marcus found work doing overnight security at a warehouse in the South Loop. The hours were brutal but predictable, which was what he needed. His sister Francine watched Penny during the overnights, sleeping on the couch in a way she insisted didn't bother her but probably did. He worked, he picked Penny up from school, he made dinner, he read to her until she fell asleep, and then he went and stood in a warehouse for 8 hours. It wasn't a life, it was a corridor. Penny asked him once, about a week in, why he looked tired. New job, he said. Do you like it? It pays, he said, which was the kind of answer parents give when they're trying to be honest without being heavy. She looked at him across the dinner table with those gray eyes that he'd never figured out where they came from. Not him, not her mother, some recessive ghost of a grandparent, and said, "You should get a job you like, Dad. You're good at too many things to do a job you don't like." He didn't know what to say to that. "I love you," he said. "I know," she said, and went back to her pasta. He got the call from a school in Evanston on a Thursday. The safety coordinator there had heard about him from Dr. Fowler. Would he be willing to consult on a security assessment? The pay was modest. The hours were flexible. He said yes. That led to another call from a school district in Oak Park. Then a call from a nonprofit that ran after-school programs in 4 neighborhoods and had been trying to figure out how to make their sites safer without the budget of a private school. They couldn't pay much. They were transparent about it. He took that one anyway. Penny drew him a picture of himself with a cape. "I'm not a superhero," he said. "You go to lots of schools and make them safer. That's a consultant." "Okay, a superhero consultant." He taped it to the corkboard next to the photo from the lakefront. The call from Connor Hale came on a Tuesday morning in December while Marcus was reviewing a floor plan for the Oak Park program. "This is Connor Hale. We met briefly. I'm COO at Marsh Group. I remember. I'm calling about a position we're developing. Director of Facilities Safety and Risk Assessment. We're consolidating security oversight across all our properties, and we need someone who thinks about buildings the way you do. Structurally, practically, with an eye for how people actually move through spaces under stress. Your consulting work over the past month has been on our radar." Marcus set down his pencil. "Why are you calling me and not HR?" "Because Elaine wanted someone who knew your work to make the call. She thought it would feel less like a transaction." There was a pause. "Is it a transaction?" Marcus said. "Partially," Connor said. "We need someone who can do this job, and you're the best person we've found. That's business. But Elaine also thinks she owes you a fair shot at something that uses your actual skills. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive." He thought about Penny's drawing, about the Oak Park floor plan on his desk, about the overnight shift he'd been dreading for 2 weeks. "Send me the job description," he said. "I'll think about it, of course, and tell Ms. Marsh." He paused. "Tell her I appreciate the distinction." He accepted the position on a Friday. Started on a Monday. The office was on the 29th floor, 2 floors below Elaine's, which felt like the right kind of distance. His team was small and professional and took him seriously from the first meeting, which he hadn't known he needed until it happened. The first time he ran into Elaine in the elevator, they were both carrying coffee and neither of them said anything for the first 2 floors. Then she said, "How's the 3rd floor intake system holding up? I found 4 access points that aren't on any of your current security maps. That's alarming. That's Tuesday." She almost smiled. He noticed but didn't comment. They fell into something. Not quickly, not cleanly. There was too much between them for that. Too much weight and history and mutual wariness. But they started having coffee sometimes, not planned, just when they were both getting the same elevator or passing the same corner of the building. She told him about Nadia, and he told her about Penny, and they compared notes the way parents do, with a kind of exhausted fluency that people without kids don't quite understand. "She asked me once why I work so much," Elaine said one afternoon. They were at a table near the window of the ground floor cafe, watching snow move sideways past the glass. She was 6. She said, "Mom, do you like your job more than you like me?" And I said, "Of course not, sweetheart." And she said, "Then how come you're always there?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What did you say?" I told her it was complicated. "What did she say to that?" She said, "That's what you say when you don't want to explain." He didn't quite laugh. "That's what Penny says too." "They know," Elaine said. "They know exactly what we're doing. Yeah, I canceled a board dinner last week to take her to a school thing. First time in." She stopped. "I don't know how long." "A long time." "Was it good?" She made a solar system diorama. Elaine looked at her coffee. She used a marble for Mercury and it kept rolling off the table. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Marcus thought about Penny's drawing on the corkboard, about all the dinners he'd made when he was too tired to stand and made them anyway, about the ways love took the shape of its container. "For what it's worth," he said carefully, "I don't think you're as far gone as you think you are. From being someone who knows what matters." She looked at him then, really looked, not the way she'd looked at him in the conference room or the hospital, or even the car, not assessing, not guilty, not strategic. Just straight on the way people look at each other when they've stopped performing. I fired you, she said. You did, in front of 30 people, 32, and you're. She stopped. You're here, working 2 floors below me. 3 floors, helping me fix the building I couldn't even admit was broken. That's the job, Marcus. She said his name the way people say things when they mean more than the word. I'm trying to apologize. I know. He wrapped his hands around his cup. His right hand, the one she'd seen in the hospital, had healed cleaner than the doctor expected. He barely noticed it anymore. You don't have to keep doing that. I want to, then just. He thought about how to say it. Just don't do it again. To the next person who comes through that door. Ask first. That's all I ever needed. She didn't answer right away. The snow moved past the glass. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang. I'm trying, she said. I know. They sat with that for a while. Spring came to Chicago the way it always did, reluctantly, in stages, with occasional retreats into cold that made you doubt it had ever been serious. Marcus had been at Marsh Group 4 months. The security protocols he'd implemented had already flagged 2 incidents before they became problems. His team had tripled. The schools he'd consulted with had referred him to other schools, and Elaine had, without a big announcement, folded that work into his official duties as community safety outreach. Paid time, legitimate resources. He hadn't asked for it. She'd done it anyway. Penny and Nadia had met twice, once at a park in February, where they'd spent 45 minutes on the swings and then declared themselves best friends with the absolute conviction of children who have not yet learned that friendship is complicated. The second time was at Elaine's apartment, where Penny had declared the kitchen huge, and Nadia had declared Penny's purple sneakers the best shoes I've ever seen, and the 2 of them had spent 2 hours building a blanket fort while the adults sat in the living room being awkward, and then gradually less awkward. Marcus still lived in Bridgeport. Elaine still lived in the Gold Coast. Those things hadn't changed and probably wouldn't for a while. But there were coffee conversations that went longer than either of them planned, and there were text messages about things that had nothing to do with work. And there was the particular ease that develops between people when they've stopped trying to manage how the other person sees them. On a Saturday in April, both families went to the lakefront, not planned, just an overlap of schedules and Nadia's insistence that she wanted to show Penny where she'd fed the ducks last fall. Drew was there too, with the easy equanimity of a man who had made peace with complicated arrangements. The girls ran ahead on the path, Penny's light-up sneakers blinking with each step. Marcus and Elaine walked a few feet behind and didn't talk for a while, which was the kind of silence that had stopped being empty somewhere around January. I keep waiting for it to feel normal, Elaine said finally. What? This. She gestured vaguely at all of it. The lake, the kids ahead of them, the strange fact of their being here together. I spent so long treating my life like a project to be managed. Goals, metrics, outcomes. And now I'm just. She paused, walking. Is that bad? It's unfamiliar. Give it time. She glanced at him. You're very patient with me. You gave me a job I'm good at and stay out of my way when I'm doing it. That earns a lot. That's a low bar. Most people can't clear it. The girls had stopped ahead of them, conferring about something with the seriousness of a diplomatic summit. Penny pointed at the water. Nadia nodded. They ran toward the railing together. She's happy, Elaine said, watching them. Yeah, Penny, I know who you meant. She's... Elaine stopped, the way she moves through the world, like it's still basically good. She's 6, Nadia's 8, and she's already learned to be careful. A pause. I think I did that. Taught her to be careful. Or, Marcus said, you taught her to scream when someone grabs her, and she screamed, and she's fine, and standing at that railing right now eating whatever that is that Penny just handed her. Elaine squinted. What is that? Crackers, probably. She carries crackers everywhere. Elaine made a sound that was almost a laugh. At 42, I fired a man for being late and then spent the next 6 months learning what I should have known all along. She shook her head. That's a long way around. Most people don't make it around at all. She looked at him. I'm serious, he said. Most people just keep firing everyone and calling it standards. She was quiet. The lake moved. The girls turned from the railing and came running back, breathless, Penny waving a cracker. Dad, there was a really big boat. I believe you. Like really big. Can we get hot chocolate? It's April. It's still cold. He looked at Elaine. She looked at him. Drew, who had caught up from somewhere behind, shrugged in the universal language of why not. They found a cafe near the path. The girls got hot chocolate. The adults got coffee. They sat at 2 tables they pushed together, awkward and loud, and not at all what any of them had planned for this particular Saturday. Later, on the drive home, Penny fell asleep in the back seat before they'd gone 3 blocks. Marcus drove in the quiet and thought about the morning he'd walked into a boardroom 40 minutes late and had his access badge taken from him in front of 32 people. He thought about the elevator down, the cold air outside, the truck sitting in the parking structure. He thought about the things that looked like endings. He'd built his whole adult life on the understanding that some things don't come back once they're gone. Grace, the career he'd had before, the future he'd imagined when he was 26, and thought he knew what the shape of things would be. And maybe that was still true. Maybe loss was still loss, irreducible and permanent. But some things came from loss that wouldn't have come any other way. He pulled into the parking spot behind the 2-flat and sat in the quiet for a minute before waking Penny. "We're home," he said. She didn't open her eyes. "I know how you smell different when we're home." He didn't know what to say to that. He unbuckled her and carried her up the stairs and put her to bed in her room with the drawings on the walls and the corkboard above her desk that was slowly getting as full as his. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen, made tea he didn't need, and looked at the photograph on the corkboard. Him and Penny at the lakefront last July, squinting into the sun. He thought about adding a new one, the one Drew had taken on his phone that afternoon of the 4 of them at the pushed-together cafe tables, everyone mid-sentence, no one looking at the camera, the girls' hot chocolates tipping dangerously. He went to his phone and texted Elaine, "Drew sent me the photo. Good day." The response took a few minutes, which meant she was doing the same thing he'd just done, standing in some room in her apartment thinking about what to say. "Best day I've had in a long time," she wrote. "I didn't plan any of it." He typed back, "Best ones never are." He plugged in his phone and looked out the window at the back alley, where spring was starting to make good on its promises, a thin green line along the fence, the sky not quite dark at 8 o'clock. He thought about tomorrow, about the school in Rogers Park he was going to visit in the morning, about Penny's recital on Thursday, about the Marsh Group board presentation he'd been asked to give next month, the one where he'd stand in front of the people who made decisions about what safety actually cost, and try to make them understand that the question was never what it cost to fix something, but what it cost to let it stay broken. He thought about Elaine standing at the lakefront saying, "Most people don't make it around at all." He thought she was right. He turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. Outside, the city kept going the way cities do, indifferent and alive, full of people navigating the distance between who they were yesterday and who they were trying to become, failing and adjusting, and sometimes, if they were paying attention, finding that the life they ended up with was stranger and truer and more worth having than the one they'd originally planned.